maybe a little bit annoyed at how slow this car is. It doesn't have a lot of get up and go, which we'll get into in a moment because this actually has an engine swap. What is up, guys? Today I am sitting behind the wheel of a 1977 Porsche 911S. And this may be the oldest, if not one of the oldest cars I've ever personally driven. And I'm someone who's a huge fan of the 911 in general, but has mostly had the opportunity to drive relatively recent 911s, a bunch of 991s, a couple 992s. I don't even think I've ever driven a 997 or 996. So I'm going way back to the 70s now, to a car that's well over 40 years old, and I'm just excited to kind of describe to you guys some of the very obvious differences that I feel and notice, but also just kind of what this car is all about and why people are still opting to buy older 911s for 40, 50, 60, 70 grand instead of buying maybe a slightly used 991 generation 911. Before I get out onto the road, I'm just going to ask that if you guys could please like the video, subscribe to the channel. It all helps the channel out a lot. And let's get out onto the road and discuss more. All right, so setting off here, it's boiling hot out today. It's August, it's summer, it's midday. I'm in the canyons, so it's well over 100 degrees, and I'm dying in here with not so great 1970s air conditioning. But what I really want to discuss is why people are still opting to buy air-cooled Porsches over a naturally aspirated and otherwise fantastic car in a 991.1 generation Carrera. So we'll get into some of the minute details later, but what I want to start with are the looks. And it's the fact that this car not only is vintage now, but it's a classic, and it's a car that is a looker. I've just gotten so many thumbs up and waves from fellow car enthusiasts out here in the canyons. I've had people in the city looking at me, both because this is not your everyday car, but also because it's super slow, so I'm probably annoying them in traffic, holding them up. It's not the peppiest car, but this does happen to have an engine swap, which we'll also get into in a moment. But to wrap up the looks, I'm not going to describe all the little tiny details of a car that's been around for over 40 years and a car that I'm sure most of you are very familiar with. But what I will say is that this car is so small, and it's just so obviously small, both on the inside where I can easily reach the passenger side window, but also just looking at the car and its footprint and its overall length is very small. It's very narrow. Because of that, you actually have a square setup. You have Fuchs style wheels that look fantastic, but they're only 15 inches in diameter, and you have 205 section rubber on all four corners. So in the modern context, that's exceptionally narrow, an exceptionally narrow tire, especially for a 911. I think a brand new 992 Carrera S has 305s in the rear, so 100 millimeters wider in the rear in the span of about 45 years. So that's incredible, but this is not a very fast car. It's just a very sensory car in every sense of the word. The inside, again, I won't bore you, but I love how you have the 5 pods, which is obviously where the current 5-pod semi-digital setup is derived from. I personally prefer these analog gauges to the digital, but again, we're talking about 1977 versus 2021. I understand the use case for digital gauges or partially semi-digital gauges. And I think Porsche executes them better than many other makes do. It's just that seeing your fuel gauges, your tach, your speedo, even this clock over here, it's all just a very sensory experience, and it's all very tactile and very raw, which again is part of the appeal of why people are choosing to buy a 930 over a 991 for about the same price used, or maybe a 997 for the same price used. Now, the couple things that I have to complain about are the ergonomics, and part of that's just due to the small size that I mentioned. As lovely as it is that this car is so small and so compact, and I've heard Matt Farah from the Smoking Tire always talk about being able to take a line within your lane in these older 911s, and now in a 992, the car fills up the entire lane. So that's very true, and I noticed that immediately. But the steering wheel is fixed in place, and me at about 6'2", I'm not really able to bring it out to me, so I gotta sit further back due to my legs, but then I have the steering wheel a little bit further for me than I like. Furthermore, the pedals on all 911s are a little bit inset. That's actually true of a lot of Italian sports cars as well. But in this case, you have no proper dead pedal. You have a very minimal travel on your accelerator pedal, so you're not able to really push the car the way you would like to via the accelerator. You have to really use gearing as the way to get the car going. So you have a light flywheel, which is nice, but you have to really drop gears and get your revs up, and that's the only way to get the car going. It's not by kind of getting deeper into the pedal. The pedal travel is about 1.5 inches. It's the shortest travel pedal I've ever experienced. Yet simultaneously, the clutch is a very long travel, as you'd expect from an older car, and that's kind of something I've noticed from most older cars I've driven, is you have a very long pedal travel in your clutch. So I guess this is as good of a time as ever to discuss the engine that is a little bit peppier than it would have been standard, because this has this is a 77, which should have 2.7 liter naturally aspirated flat 6 motor, which produces 165 horsepower and 174 pound-feet of torque. This happens to have, as I said, an engine swap to a 79 911SC Super Carrera Targa engine, so it's a 3 liter flat 6, and in this case it's producing 180 horsepower and 175 pound-feet of torque. So the torque is a wash, but you're going up from 165 to 180, so you're gaining about 15 horsepower. More so, this engine's just a bit more peppy than that 2.7 is, and the owner of this car said that they swapped the engine back in the year 2000, so just over 20 years ago, because the 2.7 was causing them so many problems. They've actually also mentioned slightly regretting doing that, because keeping these cars as original as possible is kind of the way to go, and otherwise this car is original, but at the time these were not worth too much back in 2000, and the bubble had not begun, the air-cooled bubble had not begun. In fact, we still were just entering the first generation back in 2000 of water-cooled 911s, so impossible to see the future in that regard. But because he went ahead and swapped the engine to this more peppy motor, you do get a bit of a better driving experience, which can't complain about. Still not a car that you can push very fast in the modern sense. I would imagine that the likes of a base Miata could outpace this car on a canyon road, but it's more about the essence and the feel of driving something that's from a different time and transporting yourself back there. Now the owner, because he went ahead and did the engine, said, you know what, I'm gonna go all out, and he actually got the seats reupholstered here, and I gotta say they look fantastic. Once again, the seat is the original seat, but not original leather, but you have a beautiful new supple leather, and it does help modernize the interior of this car just a smidge. Now what I'm noticing also, sorry for ranting, but what I'm noticing also is that I kind of can just stick in 3rd or 4th gear depending on whether I'm going up or downhill. Mostly staying in 4th downhill and using inertia, but uphill I was staying in 3rd to kind of stay in the power band a little bit. And you really want to stay between about 3 and 5K in this car, so 3rd gear uphill or slightly uphill going up a canyon is perfect, and that makes the experience a little easier in this car, because the transmission is not fantastic. Now again, I'm fairly young, and this car predates me by quite a bit, but it's nice to see you don't have to change gears too much in a transmission that otherwise is a little sloppy. It's hard to place the gears or place the shifter into gear perfectly, and I'm starting to understand why a lot of 70s and 80s Ferraris and Lamborghinis have gated shifters. It was to kind of take away some of the challenge of finding the gear during performance driving. I said this car predates me. Obviously this car is from 1977, and the one thing I'll say is that for the history buffs out there, this car is so old that it wasn't even just made in Germany, it was made in Western Germany. So that's always a reminder of just how much things have changed since this car was new. We are very much sort of entirely different world, and cars are very different nowadays. So this is nice for those who maybe were growing up in the 60s and 70s and couldn't afford one of these cars new, and they want to reminisce, they want to take a journey back and own something they couldn't own new now that they have the money. So I think I see a lot of guys in their 50s, 60s driving these that were kids when these were new. Obviously they made the 930s through the 80s, so there's even guys in their 40s these days that are driving them around, again, just having grown up on them. But as I begin to conclude this video, I just want to kind of discuss how I feel. I personally would not replace a brand new 992 or even 991.2 base Carrera with this. I'm not implying that this costs as much as those cars, but what I'm saying is experience-wise, I'm still probably going to take one of those if push came to shove. But that's just because they're so much more capable and so much faster than this. But if I'm someone with a collection of cars or someone where I'm considering a third or a fourth car, that's kind of where I'd be looking for the experience, the sensory experience that this provides, which is very hard to replicate in, I would say, any car from the last 15 or so years. So that's kind of where the gears are going in my head. Otherwise, it's not a daily drivable car in my eyes, and it's not the fastest car by any means. Again, I think that a lot of pretty inexpensive modern cars could outpace this. I just drove a Focus ST that I think would pretty handily outpace this car in a canyon road, especially as this one's configured, even despite that engine swap to a slightly more powerful SC motor, the 3.0. It also can't even fit one tall boy. So this is actually a record holder now on my channel for 0 tall boys, absolutely 0 tall boys, which is obviously a joke. It's part of the beauty of this car. It's like the Germans, the Western Germans, weren't even considering cup holders or anything of the such when they were making this car. And I will say I'll give this car one more big compliment. It sounds great. There's very little sound deadening. Obviously, again, the car is small, but you really hear the engine. Here, I'll drop a gear or two and you'll see what I mean. It's like that light flywheel, the revs build up quick, and you really do hear the motor, that flat 6. And the exhaust also sounds decently good. So I mean, I enjoy the experience, and I'll wrap this video up officially by saying this. I'm going to be driving a 993 Carrera S for my next video. So if you've made it this far, and if this video is new, tune in next week. And if this video is not new, go check my channel, because I'm gonna drive that 993, and that splits the difference kind of between this much older 911 and the modern day 911s that I have driven, have a lot of experience with. So I'm gonna see if that's that sweet spot, and those are worth a whole lot of money now. So I'm gonna see what that experience is like, and all I gotta do after that is drive a 964. So thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate you guys for checking out this awesome classic Porsche. And on that note, thank you guys for watching. Please consider subscribing. New videos are dropping every single week. Comment down below, let me know what you guys want to see. I'll do my best to make it happen. And as always, this is Rio. Peace out.